Well, here we are, back again, and I guess you could call this a special election edition deep dive.
Yeah.
You've probably, I don't know about you, but I've spent the last 24 hours kind of glued to the news,
Yeah.
trying to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, me too. It's been a roller coaster.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride, and with
Yeah.
Trump back in the White House, I think uh, everybody's kind of wondering what's going to happen
Really?
next,
Yeah, what's next for America? What's next for the market?
especially when it comes to the markets.
Yeah, huge question mark.
Big question mark. And for this deep dive, what we're going to be focusing on is what this all means for one company in particular.
Right, and a company a lot of our listeners are very interested in, of course, GameStop.
GameStop, exactly.
So we wanted to take a really close look at how this election could impact everything that's going on with GameStop.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going beyond the headlines here. We're doing a real deep dive, and we got some fascinating sources that you sent us.
Yeah, we've got some really interesting reports on the financial markets, potentially regulatory shakeups coming down the line,
Oh, yeah.
some articles on, well, let's just say some questionable practices on Wall Street.
Juicy.
Yeah, there's some real juicy stuff in here. And we even tapped into the Super Stonk subreddit to get a feel for what retail investors are thinking right now.
Always gotta check in with Superstonk and see what the temperature is.
Yeah, absolutely. They're on the front lines.
So strap in, folks. This is going to be a wild one. We're talking potential market manipulation, the future of blockchain, and maybe even, just maybe, whether the MOASS, the mother of all short squeezes, is still on the table.
The million-dollar question, right? I mean, that's what everyone wants to know. Could this be the catalyst?
Yeah, is this the catalyst?
Could be. So let's kick things off with the big picture. Trump's back, and he is all about deregulation, wants to shake things up on Wall Street. Now, that could be really good news for retail investors, less red tape, more freedom. But of course, it comes with some risks too.
It's interesting. One of the sources we have actually highlights how Trump's own media company, trading under DJT,
Oh, yeah.
was a target of short sellers.
That's right, yeah. So he's seen firsthand how these tactics that some of these big players use can really impact a company.
Yeah.
So there's some speculation that, he might be extra motivated to kind of crack down on things like naked shorting.
Now, hold on. For our listeners out there who maybe aren't Wall Street whizzes, can you break down what naked shorting actually is?
Sure, yeah. So basically, it's when someone sells shares of stock that they don't actually own, hoping to buy them back later at a lower price, hoping to make a profit on that price difference.
Right.
But the problem is it can artificially drive down the price of a stock, and that can create a really unfair playing field, especially for retail investors who might not have the same resources as these big institutions.
Right, right. Okay. So if Trump cracks down on that, that would be a good thing for a company like GameStop, which has been, you all know, a major target of short sellers.
Potentially, yeah. I mean, that's definitely a possibility. And that's kind of where things get really interesting for the GameStop crowd, especially those who are, still holding out for that massive short squeeze. Could this be the thing that finally triggers it? But, it's not that simple, right? Deregulation, it can be a double-edged sword. It can cut both ways.
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, less regulation could definitely help curb some of those shady tactics that we were talking about, but it could also lead to more volatility in the market overall.
Right.
So more opportunities for huge wins, but also, the potential for some really big losses.
It's a high-stakes game, for sure. And speaking of high stakes, we can't forget about the SEC, right?
Yes.
The agency that's supposed to be the referee on Wall Street, making sure everyone's playing by the rules. And Trump has made it very clear that he wants to replace Gary Gensler, the current head of the SEC.
Big change, yeah. And Gensler has been pushing for more transparency, stricter enforcement, really ruffled some feathers on Wall Street. So, there's a lot of folks wondering what's going to happen next.
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, right? Is Trump's pick going to be better or worse for retail investors?
That's what we all want to know. And our sources highlight some serious concerns about the stability of the financial system overall. We've got JP Morgan Chase, the largest bank in the US, facing hundreds of investigations, spending billions, literally billions of dollars on legal fees just in the last couple of years.
Wait, really?
Billions?
Billions with a B. It's pretty wild. Makes you wonder what's going on behind the scenes if even the giants are this shaky.
Right. And this connects directly to what we were talking about earlier, market volatility. If the big banks are in trouble, that could create a ripple effect across the entire market.
So a Trump presidency, deregulation, a new sheriff at the SEC. Sounds like we're in for a pretty wild ride.
Buckle up, folks. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be a wild one, that's for sure.
And especially for GameStop, okay?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, GameStop, it's already a volatile stock. This could mean some serious swings, either way, up or down.
So for those of us who are, watching GameStop, what should we be paying attention to? Besides the whole potential for the market to just, go completely haywire.
Well, one thing to watch is how Trump approaches market transparency. He's talked a lot about wanting to make things fairer for retail investors, kind of level the playing field a little bit.
And what would that look like in practice? I mean, what does that mean, fairer?
Well, one of the sources we have suggests that more transparency around short selling could be a real game changer. Right now, it's really hard to get a clear picture of just how much short interest there is in a given stock, like how many people are betting against it. There's a lot of, kind of behind the scenes stuff going on.
Right.
So if that information was more readily available, it would be harder for these big institutions to manipulate the stock price without everyone knowing.
Okay. That makes sense. Which, kind of brings us back to that whole MOAS, the mother of all short squeezes that everyone's talking about. Is that still a possibility under a Trump presidency?
It's definitely a question a lot of people are asking. Some of the sources we've got, especially from the Superstonk subreddit, suggest that if Trump really does crack down on things like naked shorting and we start to see more transparency in the market, it could create the conditions for another squeeze. If all those hidden short positions are suddenly forced to cover, the stock price could skyrocket.
And not everyone's convinced, right?
Right, exactly. There's another side to this argument, and it's that the GameStop saga was, a unique moment in time. It was this perfect storm of events, the pandemic, the rise of social media, all this pent-up frustration with Wall Street.
So you're saying it's possible that even with, Trump's policies, lightning won't strike twice.
It's definitely a possibility. The stars might not align in quite the same way. But regardless of what happens with the MOAS, I think it's important to remember that GameStop has become, much more than just a stock.
You're right. It's a symbol. Right. It's a symbol of this whole movement of retail investors who are challenging the status quo. They're saying, hey, we're not just going to sit back and let these big institutions control everything.
Exactly. And that movement, it isn't going away no matter who's in the White House. In fact, it's likely to keep evolving and gaining momentum.
Speaking of evolution, let's talk about the blockchain angle.
Yeah.
GameStop has been making some interesting moves in that space.
They have, and this is where Trump's, very pro-crypto stance could really come into play. One of the sources we have outlines this potential future where companies like GameStop could issue shares directly on the blockchain, cutting out those Wall Street middlemen entirely.
Wow, now that's a game changer. It's like taking power back from the big institutions and putting it directly in the hands of, everyday people.
It's a radical idea, but it's gaining traction. And with Trump's support for cryptocurrencies, it's not entirely out of the realm of possibility.
So if we connect all the dots here, we've got a president who's, pro-market, pro-crypto, and potentially more sympathetic to retail investors. Could this be like the perfect environment for a company like GameStop to thrive?
There's certainly potential. A lot of pieces could fall into place. But it's important to remember, there are also risks. Deregulation doesn't always lead to positive outcomes.
Okay, so it's a mixed bag. There are potential upsides, potential downsides. But how does this all translate to the average person? Like, what does a Trump presidency really mean for their lives, their finances, their future?
That's the crucial question, and it's where things get even more complex. Our sources highlight some real concerns about the potential impact of Trump's policies on, everyday people.
Like what?
Well, for one, there are worries about the widening gap between the wealthy and, everyone else. Trump's tax cuts, while they might be beneficial for corporations and high earners, could end up exacerbating income inequality.
And then there's the issue of climate change. One of our sources points out that, despite overwhelming scientific evidence, Trump's administration is continuing to prioritize fossil fuels over renewable energy.
That's right. And that has huge implications for the environment, the future of our planet. It's a reminder that we need to think beyond short-term gains and consider the long-term consequences of our actions.
It's a lot to process, for sure. But it's important to have these conversations to, really examine the potential impact of political and economic decisions on our lives and on the world around us.
Absolutely. And I think this deep dive has really highlighted, the complexities of the situation. There are no easy answers, no guaranteed outcomes. It's a lot to grapple with.
It's a wild ride, that's for sure. But hey, isn't that what makes it all so fascinating? It definitely keeps us on our toes. Okay, so we talk about the big picture. Trump, the markets, all that volatility, the potential for things to get pretty crazy. We talked about GameStop and kind of how GameStop fits into all of this, its unique position. But let's bring it back to you, the listener. What does this all mean, for you and your investments?
Yeah, that's the question, right? What does it all boil down to? And I think the key takeaway here is there's no one-size-fits-all answer. It really depends on your individual circumstances, your risk tolerance, what your investment goals are.
So what are some things our listeners should be thinking about as they, navigate this new landscape? It's a new world, right?
It is. It's uncharted territory in a lot of ways. And I think, first and foremost, it's crucial to stay informed. Don't just rely on, headlines or what you see on social media. Dig deeper, explore different perspectives, really try to understand the nuances of the issues at play.
And that's what we try to do here on the Deep Dive. Help people, cut through all the noise and really make sense of it all.
Exactly, yeah. We're all about providing that context, the analysis to help you make those informed decisions. And in a time like this, a time of such uncertainty, that's more important than ever.
Absolutely. And it's not just about staying informed, though, is it? It's about, staying engaged, too.
Right. You can't just be a passive observer. You got to get involved. Make your voice heard. Contact your elected officials. Participate in discussions. Advocate for the policies you believe in.
Because at the end of the day, this is about our collective future. The decisions that are made today, they're going to have a lasting impact, not just on, the financial system, but on the environment, on our lives as a whole.
Exactly. It's all connected,
Yeah.
and we all have a role to play in shaping that future.
Now, before we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought, something to ponder as we enter this new era. Imagine a world where companies can interact directly with their shareholders, cutting out the middlemen, the gatekeepers, the Wall Street establishment.
That's an idea that's been gaining some serious traction, especially, with the rise of blockchain technology.
Right, and this is something that could potentially create, a more transparent financial system, a more equitable system, a more accessible system.
It's a vision worth exploring, that's for sure. And who knows, maybe GameStop, with their embrace of the blockchain and that passionate community of retail investors, maybe they could be at the forefront of this revolution.
It's an exciting possibility. So to all our listeners out there, stay curious, stay engaged, and don't be afraid to, challenge the status quo. The future of finance, it might just be in your hands. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.